Nearly 3,500 years ago, the creator of the universe, whose name is YaHuWaH, went into judgment against the most powerful superpower of the day, which was called in those days Mitzrayim, or today, Egypt. YaHuWaH, the creator of heaven and earth, not only went into judgment against the Mitzrayites, but against the very abominations, the idols that they spread their hands to. YaHuWaH struck down their mighty ones in the 10 plagues that we see he poured out on Egypt. And the final plague, the plague of the death of the firstborn, not only impacted the mighty ones of Egypt, but the mighty one of Egypt, who was called Pharaoh. You see, the worship of Pharaoh is the same idolatry that YaHuWaH condemns in the last days through what is called the so-called anti-Messiah. All that we see in the book of Exodus or Shemoth will be repeated in a more powerful way in these end times that we now live in. You see, the Passover story, what is called Pesach, where YaHuWaH not only judged the firstborn of man and beast, but also their mighty ones. Not only did he strike them down, but he did something even more spectacular. He ransomed the children of Israel, his inheritance, the people that he had betrothed to himself. He ransomed them with the blood of a perfect lamb. You see, YaHuWaH told them clearly that he was going into judgment against not only the mighty ones of Egypt, but all of Mitzrayim, their culture, their language, everything that they held dear in that night was about to be struck down. They almost did not survive at all. YaHuWaH saw the blood that he had required of the Israelites. He told them that they must find for themselves a perfect lamb. And that this perfect lamb that had to be inspected, that there would be no blemish whatsoever. It had to be absolutely perfect. That this perfect lamb had to be sacrificed, and that the blood of the lamb would be applied to the doorposts and to the lintel of the door of their home. And when YaHuWaH Elohim would go into judgment against the land of Mitzrayim, the world system of the day, he was looking for something very special. The scriptures even call it a token or a sign. The Hebrew calls it an oath, and it was the blood of a lamb. The sign, the oath in Hebrew, the blood of the lamb is very prophetic. We must understand the role of the King Messiah, whose name is Yahushua, for it is no longer a mystery that he is the Passover lamb. We understand this throughout the scriptures. It has been prophetically revealed to us that he is the perfect one who was inspected, and there was no blemish found in him, no fault at all. And it was he who was nailed to the stake, he whose bones were not broken. According to the book of John, it says it was the preparation day of the Pesach, the Passover, in John chapter 19. And we read further in the book of Yahuchanan or John, and we see he was to be the perfect lamb, because we see in the Pesach that the lamb could not have his bones broken. The word Pesach not only refers to the actual slaughter offering of the lamb itself, but it also means literally to leap over. That is where the term Passover comes from. The Almighty says that he will leap over you if he sees this. Now, it could also be understood in a very different way. This word can also mean to stagger, as if one is limping. And in this kind of implies the idea that you are barely saved in this moment. So it just depends on how one wants to understand the wording there. But I believe that both understandings are important for us today, to understand that not only would YaHuWaH leap over us and this idea that he would totally forgive us, but also the nearness of the concept of the death that was there all around, and how it was the blood of the lamb and only the blood of the lamb that separated you from death in that night. The Pesach begins the slaughterings of what is called the Tamid offerings. The Tamid offerings are the perpetual offerings of a lamb that would be given every single day. The Pesach also begins what is called the ransoming of the children of Israel. YaHuWaH tells the children of Israel that he ransomed them in that night. And to ransom means to pay a price. Therefore, it was understood in the Torah, the words of Moshe himself, that the Passover sacrifice was a ransoming for the children of Israel. Their firstborn would now be ransomed to YaHuWaH. And therefore, throughout the scriptures, we are told that we are to ransom our firstborn. The scriptures go through great detail to tell us that the ransoming of the firstborn was to be a sign forever, just like the Passover itself, just like the Pesach. The Pesach is called a sign forever. This is very important to understand because the sign forever is like that sign on the doorpost, the blood that YaHuWaH required when he went into judgment with the Mitzrites. Why would the Torah tell us these things unless it was on the mind and heart of the creator of the universe to show us the future in which he tells us that his people would be scattered throughout the nations and hardships like Pharaoh would come upon them, but that he would redeem them and bring them back to himself, just as he did in the story of the Exodus from Egypt or Mitzrayim. Therefore, we must understand these ordinances, for YaHuWaH has told us that the Passover ordinance is forever, leolam wa'ed, which means forever and ever. In other words, there is no end to the revelation of the Passover. That is why we need to understand the King Messiah, Yahushua, and his role. You see, when we study the scriptures carefully, starting in Bereshith or Genesis in the very beginning, we see that it was Abel who was able to bring a sacrifice to YaHuWaH that actually pleased him. His brother Cain provided vegetables, but he provided what? The lamb, right? Therefore, the picture of the lamb is what is acceptable all the way back to the beginning. And what else is important in this story is because Abel or Hebel was able to bring forth this offering that pleased YaHuWaH, his brother was jealous and killed him. Right in the beginning, this is the very revelation of the King Messiah revealed in Cain and Hebel. But not only this is echoed throughout the scriptures further. We see that, for instance, Abraham, who was a man of livestock, he was a man who pleased YaHuWaH. YaHuWaH spoke to him, told him that he should leave from Ur and come to the land that he would show him. And he made that journey to the promised land in what we call imunah, or belief, and endurance. People call it faith. Abraham had belief or imunah, and it pleased YaHuWaH. Therefore, he made a covenant with him and his descendants forever. And if we want to understand who the King Messiah would be, we should examine the life of Abraham Abenu, who is called Abraham, our father. He is the man of belief who demonstrates to us to surrender to YaHuWaH and to come out of Babylon. He was in Ur of the Chaldees, and to come into the promised land. We are now in Babylon, spiritually speaking. And just like YaHuWaH judged the Pharaoh in Egypt, he will judge the Babylon. We see in the scriptures clearly Babylon will fall. So in the midst of the fall of Babylon, how do we, brothers and sisters, find favor with YaHuWaH, who is now telling us that the cup of his wrath is about to be totally full? He tells us that the cup of his wrath will be poured out in the end times. And there are many prophecies that I could go through that tell us, if we were to look at, for instance, Isaiah 63, Yeshayahu 63, we see that the King Messiah will trod down the winepress of the fierceness of the wrath of YaHuWaH El Shaddai. It says that his garments will be covered in blood. We also see this echoed in Revelation. Therefore, we should remember the words of the Torah. In the Song of Moses, Moshe said, YaHuWaH Ishmael, YaHuWaH Shmo, YaHuWaH is a man of war, YaHuWaH is his name. And if YaHuWaH is coming to judge the nations, how do you think that you will have favor to stand in front of him in that day? How can I find favor in front of the one whose name lives forever? Who says that his ways are not like our ways. His thoughts are not even near our thoughts. His ways are higher than our ways, like the heavens above the earth. So how do you fathom that you will stand in that day? If the scriptures are telling us the prophetic revelation of the end times and the judgment of the Babylon system through the judgment of Egypt, then we need to understand what the scriptures say very clearly. So let's go over to Exodus, Shemoth, chapter 12. Exodus, which in Hebrew is Shemoth, it means names. Exodus means to leave a place, basically to depart. So in Exodus chapter 12, we start in verse 12. It says, "And I shall pass through the land of Mitzrayim on that night, and shall strike all the firstborn," the Bikor, which is also the word for first fruit. Firstborn are first fruits. So remember, the Messiah, who's called the firstborn, he's also called the first fruits from the grave or through the resurrection. So it says, "Therefore, and I shall pass through the land of Mitzrayim on that night, and shall strike all the Bikorim, the firstborn, in the land of Mitzrayim, both man and beast." Even the beast in the field felt the wrath of YaHuWaH in that moment, when their heart ceased to beat inside of their chest, and their conscious existence faded away forever. In that moment, in a moment where they had no understanding. And this is also a poetic metaphor, because you could look at the Mitzrayites of people who maybe had some kind of understanding. They're walking around like people, but also on the cattle, which represents the judgment on fools, and also on the possession of people in the world system that YaHuWaH Elohim opposes. Now think about it just for a moment. And I don't want to get too political here, but just think about it for a moment. YaHuWaH judged who? Egypt, Mitzrayim. And yet we see a pyramid on a dollar bill. You see the symbolism of Egypt all around you. If you have eyes to see and ears to hear, you'll understand that they use occult symbolisms of Egypt and Babylon all around. And YaHuWaH has already judged those mighty ones. When you see that all-seeing eye, YaHuWaH has already judged that mighty one. YaHuWaH is the one who sees. YaHuWaH is the one who perceives all and understands all, knows all. He has a name, YaHuWaH. His name is his mention forever, his decree forever, according to the scriptures that we read. On a daily basis, we see that it is YaHuWaH who lifts up his name. YaHuWaH who says that his name is to be praised. All right, so let's keep reading here. It says, listen, I'm going to read the whole verse 12 one more time. Let's see it. "And I shall pass through the land of Mitzrayim." You could just say the world system, or the New World Order, or you could say Egypt. Of course, it's Mitzrayim, literally, but you can apply it to today. "On that night, and I shall strike the firstborn in the land of Mitzrayim, both man and beast, and on all the mighty ones, even the mighty ones, are going to be judged." Like I've already said, the all-seeing eye is going to be judged. You know, his name in Hebrew, we're not even supposed to say the names of the mighty ones, these mighty ones according to the Torah. But his name in Egypt, his name is Ra. In Hebrew, that word is evil. That's the word for evil. That's the word for evil. So whenever you read about evil, you'll see that same word. Because YaHuWaH, his Kodesh language reveals the truth. His words reveal the truth. And he's telling you that these other mighty ones will provoke you to worship evil. Now listen, if you didn't know any better, you can just examine the evil in the world today. Look at the world leaders. They worship Baal. They worship Baal. They literally worship the Satan. And do you see their fruits? Who would want to taste of that? Who would want to trust your children with that? YaHuWaH is calling it evil because it is evil. We don't have time to be so-called politically correct. All the religions of the world are built on the lie of the Satan. The Satan would love to see you get very close to the truth and never reach the truth. He would love to see you listen to a lot of YouTube videos all day long and constantly try to study this word and never find the truth. So brothers and sisters, I don't want that for you. How do you find the truth? You have to seek the living one who lives forever. And he has told us what is going to happen. He has revealed to us that he's going to go into judgment against the land of Mitzrayim, against both man and beast. and on all the mighty ones of Mitzrayim, I shall execute judgment. I am YaHuWaH. You see how he affirms his name, and he tells you here. And he even tells Pharaoh in another place that he had literally rose the Pharaoh up to a position of power so that YaHuWaH could take him and use him and destroy him in front of all the people so that YaHuWaH's name would be known in all the earth. And that's revealed in the scriptures. So YaHuWaH wants his name to be known. And that is why now we are seeing the name of YaHuWaH being called upon by many people in these end times, because the name of YaHuWaH is being revealed. And some people are just hearing about it and they're just repeating what they're hearing. But other people are literally having the Torah written in their hearts, like the Brit Hadashah, the renewed covenant actually says, where YaHuWaH says that this is the new covenant I shall make with the house of Yehuda, or Yisrael and Yehuda in those days. And he says he will write the Torah in their hearts. And that is happening. So he says, I am YaHuWaH. So this is powerful. Now let's read further. And the blood shall be a sign. That word is oath in the Hebrew. Here it is spelled Aleph Taw. Aleph Taw, often spelled Aleph YaHuWaH. Aleph YaHuWaH is the full spelling. Aleph Taw is the shortened or defective spelling. Just like Yahushua's name is written fully with 6 letters, Yod, He, Waw, Shin, Waw, Ayin, sometimes only 5 letters. But both spellings are pronounced Yahushua. And just as Aleph YaHuWaH and Aleph Taw are sometimes spelled slightly different, they are pronounced the same way. And what this is the word for sign or token. And this is powerful because when we read the book of Revelation, we see that Yahushua the Messiah in the Revelation tells us that he is the Aleph and the Taw. Those words have fallen on deafened ears because most people think that he is saying Alpha and Omega, and somehow this is, the revelation that everything was written in Greek and it was all Greek and the Messiah spoke Greek and all this different stuff, even though we know that he spoke Hebrew according to the Greek scriptures. The Greek scripture says he spoke Hebraeus. The Aramaic scriptures of the Brit Hadashah tell us he spoke Abrite, which is Hebrew. He spoke Hebrew, right? So he said, I am the Aleph and the Taw, which is the first and the last. And he's saying he's the first and the last of the range of letters that make up the Hebrew alphabet or alphabet. And this means that he makes up the possibilities of all words. Therefore, he is called the Word for this very reason. So it is important to understand this when we study the Pesach, because we are going to find some very important details about this revelation. It says, and the blood shall be a sign for you on the houses where you are. And when I see the blood, I shall pass over you, and let not the plague come on you to destroy you when I strike the land of Mitzrayim, or Egypt. So when he sees the blood, he's going to pass over us. And in the Hebrew, it's literally raiti et hadam upeskati alken. Raiti, I shall see. Et is the Aleph Taw. That is not translated in the verse. It's not translated because people don't know how to translate it. It's called a place designator. Aleph Taw in the Hebrew is called a place designator, and it appears in various places. It almost kind of represents the word the, or like an emphasis on certain portions. And most people don't understand how this works. So you'll see the word et in various places. Sometimes it's obviously a messianic prophecy of the King Messiah. Sometimes it may not be so obvious, or it may just literally be a place designator. Now, if you add a hey to the end of that, it literally means you, a ta. Or, as an Aleph Taw, it can mean et, which is also you for female. So it has a lot of meanings, and you see it spelled in various ways. But the idea is the Aleph Taw that appears as a place designator, which appears in the book of Genesis, in the very first verse, when it says, Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim wa et haaretz. It is saying, in the beginning, Elohim created Aleph Taw, the heavens, and Aleph Taw, the earth. So therefore, when we understand that, we understand that this is a picture of creation also, right? Again, the Messiah being the Aleph Taw means that he is the Word. That is what it's basically telling us. And because the book of John, or YaHuWaH, starts in the beginning, when you read in Aramaic, it literally says Bereshith, just like it says in our Hebrew, because Aramaic and Hebrew are sister languages. So they're very similar languages, right? So these deep matters are important when we begin to study the revelation of the Pesach, because the scripture says, raiti, I shall see it, the Aleph Taw, hadam, the blood. I shall see Aleph Taw, the blood, right? So that is very important, because then it goes on to say, Wapaskati, and I shall pass over Alkem, which means you. I shall pass over them, right? I shall pass over you. So that's very important, brothers and sisters. YaHuWaH is saying when he sees the Aleph Taw, et hadam, Aleph Taw hadam, the blood, he shall pass over. So the word dam is the word for blood, right? And it begins with the letter and word dalet, right? Because in Hebrew, every letter is also a word. The pronunciation of the letter is a word. For example, beit, or a house, is also the second letter of the alphabet. Okay, so it's very important to understand. Ayin means eye. The letter ayin means an eye. Literally, also can mean a spring, but it is a word in the text. So it's very important to understand how this works. So then, when it says that he is going to pass over them, the word dam, or blood, literally begins with the letter, which means door. And you can see that that's definitely prophetic there, because they are to apply the blood to the door. And the word for blood, literally the first letter is dalet, which means door. Okay, so there are a lot of different things that are happening here, because Yahushua says that he is the door. Remember, he says, I am the door. So anyone who comes in another way is a thief and a robber. And there are going to be people who come in other ways, you know, all kinds of thieves and robbers, liars, deceivers, false prophets in the world today, and in the world all along, since the beginning of time, apparently. So this is nothing new. You know, all things under the sun are just basically happening in cycles. That is how the Hebrew scriptures understand time, through cycles. So when it says here, raiti et hadam, and I shall see Aleph Taw, the blood, will paskati, and I shall leap over you or them. It is letting you know, brothers and sisters, that YaHuWaH is requiring the sign of the Aleph Taw, which is Yahushua, his blood on the door of your heart, on the door of your mind, on the door of who you are and what you are. This was always a picture in the scriptures for the coming king, the son of David, the one who would come and fulfill all expectations, who would come and finish the works of great kings like Yoshiyahu or Josiah, who would come and bring the repentance of his people when they look upon him, that they pierced, that they shall weep for him, like one weeps for his firstborn, the scriptures tell us, in the book of Zechariah or Zechariah. So this is very important throughout the scriptures. And it tells us in the Tanakh, or what is called the Old Testament by some, you know, the Tanakh is the Hebrew scriptures. The Hebrew scriptures tell us that you shall see your sovereign lowly riding on a donkey. This is Yahushua the Messiah. No one has come like him, and no one ever will. His message, what is called his bashar, his glad tidings, his good news, has spread throughout the earth. And everyone associates him with the concept of the Messiah. Even Muslims today, even though they don't understand what it means, people associate him. They give him the lip service. All people validate him. All different tribes and tongues validate him, but he validates only himself. And so therefore, Yahushua says that he is the door. He is the way, the truth, and the life. And the scriptures tell us that the life is in the blood. So therefore, the scriptures are telling us that the nefesh is in the blood. This tells us that the Messiah's own soul, his own life, his energy was in his blood. And that is the blood that must be applied to the doorpost of your heart when YaHuWaH, the creator of heaven and earth, goes into judgment. And he will. And he is going to. Just as it says in the Exodus story, YaHuWaH sees, YaHuWaH hears, he knows. He knows what is happening in the world system. He understands what is taking place and the evils that have been planned against his own people in these last days. So now if we go over to Shemoth and we go down to verse 23, it tells us that in verse 23 it says, and YaHuWaH shall pass on to smite the Mitzrites, and shall see the blood on the lintel and on the 2 doorposts. And YaHuWaH shall pass over the door, and not allow the destroyer to come into your houses to smite you. So this is very important because it says that YaHuWaH will pass over. That's the word Pesach. Upasak YaHuWaH. And he shall pass over. He shall leap over the people that have the Aleph Taw's blood on the doorpost. And this is the mystery. This is what is called the Sod. And the Sod belongs to YaHuWaH and those who seek him. So if you have never heard people say these things, it is because you are listening to people who do not actually seek YaHuWaH. I invite you to seek YaHuWaH, the creator of the heavens and the earth. I invite you to call on his name, to surrender to him, to call on his name in the secret place, and allow our Abba, our Father, to reveal himself to you in these last days. Because what I am teaching is experiential. You yourself can experience YaHuWaH. You yourself can know him. He will give you the strength to do mighty things. He will give you revelation and understanding that the world does not have. And then you will understand the hidden things that YaHuWaH is speaking of in the Torah that we are reading here. So if we go over to Shemoth, Exodus chapter 13, when Exodus chapter 13, verse 3, we're going to read in verse 3 through verse 9. It says, and Moshe, or Moses, said to the people, remember this day in which you went out of Mitzrayim, out of the house of slavery, for by strength of hand YaHuWaH brought you out of this place. And whatever is leavened, you shall not be eaten. Today you are going out in the new moon of Abib, in Chodesh HaAbib, which is in the springtime. The word Abib referring to an exact time frame when the barley can be roasted with fire, and there's enough of it for harvesting, of course, for the entire nation. During that month is what is called Abib, so it is always in what people call the spring. But spring, is not exactly how it's determined, of course. But let's continue on. The point is that this is in the Abib. You can look up the Abib, you can study the Abib, but this is what YaHuWaH is saying. So, it says in verse 5, and it shall be, when YaHuWaH brings you into the land of the Canaanites, and the Hittites, and the Amorites, and the Hivites, and the Jebusites, which he swore to your fathers to give you, a land flowing with milk and honey, and you shall keep this service in this new moon. So YaHuWaH is saying it is a remembrance, it is a car, it is a memorial, it is something that must be done, and they are to do it when they come into the land. They did it throughout the years, and this is important because, again, YaHuWaH said that it is to be done throughout their generations forever. So that means throughout the time, throughout the eternity of time. So this is very important to understand. And it goes on to say, 7 days you eat unleavened bread, and on the 7th day is a festival to YaHuWaH, what is called a Hag. Unleavened bread, or matzah, is to be eaten the 7 days. And whatever is leavened is not to be seen with you, and leaven is not to be seen with you within all of your border. And you shall inform your son in that day, saying, it is because of what YaHuWaH did for me when I came up from Mitzrayim. And it shall be a sign, as a sign. Okay, so this is the word oath. The same word again. It shall be an oath, which again, here is Aleph Taw. And when you look at the example of the different spellings, you have Aleph Taw, meaning oath, is simply the first and the last letter of the Hebrew alphabet. However, when you look at the word oath, you insert what is called the wall. In Hebrew, the letter wall represents a nail or a tent peg, literally a spike. And so therefore, when you insert the nail into the Aleph Taw, now you have the word oath. And this word is representing the Messiah himself being pierced. So this is a very important mystery as well in the scriptures that is revealing the Pesach, the Passover. Now, if we continue to read in Exodus chapter 13 in verse, let's say we want to go to, we'll just read verse 7 again. Unleavened bread is to be eaten the 7 days, and whatever is leavened is not to be seen with you. And leaven is not to be seen with you in all of your border. And you shall inform your son in that day. It is because of what YaHuWaH did for me when I came up from Mitzrayim. And it shall be as an oath, a sign to you on your hand. Remember, on your hand. And as a reminder between your eyes that the Torah, the instructions, the commandments of the Most High, YaHuWaH, is to be in your mouth. For with a strong hand, YaHuWaH has brought you out of Mitzrayim. Now, this is very important to understand because this is telling us that the Passover observance is to literally be an oath, Aleph Taw, a picture of Messiah, in our forehead, but also in our right hand. And this, of course, is in contrast to the infamous mark of the beast, which again shows us the parallel of the Passover being a revelation of the end times. When YaHuWaH sees the Aleph Taw, he will pass over then. This is very important. Throughout the scriptures, we see these kind of revelations telling us that YaHuWaH's commandments are as a sign in our right hand and our forehead. And most people do not realize this. Most people are only familiar with the infamous mark of the beast because they are only aware of the evil. They're not aware of the scriptures. They have to actually search the scriptures to find these verses, and most do not, so they are not familiar with it. YaHuWaH is saying that this Passover observance is to be a sign. Now, this is showing us something deeper than what we could ever understand, because it is showing us again the pierced Messiah, the Aleph Taw, as a sign in the forehead and in the right hand. And this is how we get through the end times. It says, because the Torah will be in our mouth. That is why it is a sign for us. So the Torah, the words of YaHuWaH, will be in our mouth. We will be sealed. He will see the blood, and he will pass over. Pesach. He will pass over his people. And that is where the word Passover comes from. To pass over is Pesach, which again means to leap over, which, could also mean to stagger over, but it most likely means to leap over. And this is the revelation that YaHuWaH will leap over his people in the day of judgment, when he goes into judgment against this world system, against the Babylon, against all the evils that you now see, hear, and experience all around you. The murders, the thefts, all these evil things that we constantly are bombarded with in our time today in this world. YaHuWaH is going to literally have the last laugh against the evil. The scriptures tell us in Psalm chapter 2 that YaHuWaH will laugh at them because they attempted to throw off their ropes, their cords from him and his Messiah. The Messiah is prophetically spoken of throughout the Psalms, throughout the scriptures. Yahushua said that the books of Moses and the prophets revealed him, they spoke of him. These things were concealed in the Hebrew language to be revealed in these end times, so that when YaHuWaH sees Et Hadam, the Aleph Taw's blood, he will pass over his people. So this is a very important concept in the scriptures, throughout the scriptures. And we also see, when we go to the book of Exodus chapter 14, that the Israelites are now making their exodus. Okay, they're making their exodus. They have just had their Passover. YaHuWaH has passed over them and spared them. Okay, now I want you to pay attention to what happens next. The Pharaoh's army decides that they should have never let the Israelites go. So they begin to pursue them. And the Israelites are now against what is called Yam Suf, or the Sea of Reeds, today called the Red Sea. There is nowhere to go. And Moshe says to the people, stand still and see the deliverance of YaHuWaH, or the salvation of YaHuWaH, which in the Hebrew is Yeshuah YaHuWaH. Yeshuah YaHuWaH, the Taw on the end, is because of the plurality of the word. The word is Yeshuah. Normally it is spelled Yod Shin Wa Ayin He. And it is the word that is often attached to the name of YaHuWaH in some way, shape, or form, appearing 77 times, actually 78, depending on how you count them. In the scriptures, always associated with YaHuWaH's name. And this is very important because he says, you will see Yeshuah, YaHuWaH. You will see the salvations of YaHuWaH. And of course, we know what takes place. YaHuWaH tells Moshe to stretch out his rod, and he splits the sea, and the Israelites cross over on dry ground. And then, of course, YaHuWaH destroys the Egyptian army in the Yam Suf in what is called the Red Sea today. And when Moshe or Moses crosses the sea and he is there safely with the Israelites, he begins to sing what is called the Song of the Sea, but is also called the Song of Moshe, because Moses wrote several songs. And one of them he wrote immediately after the crossing of the Red Sea. And in it he says, Azi wa zimrat Yah, wa yehi li le Yeshua. Azi means my strength. Wa zimrat means song. Azi wa zimrat Yah. Yah is the short form of YaHuWaH's name that everyone agrees upon, because there is literally no doubt that Yah is the first syllable of the Creator's name. It appears throughout the scriptures. It appears in the Greek, it appears in the Hebrew, and the Aramaic. It even appears in the book of Revelation in the Greek as Alleluia. The Yah is there. The Creator's name appears there. His name is Yah. Yah Shemo is according to the scriptures. Yah is his name. It is a very important part of his name. The next extension, as we see, is Yahu, on the names like Yeremiyahu, which is Jeremiah, Yeshayahu, which is Isaiah, Eliyahu, which is Elijah. And of course, YaHuWaH is the fulfillment of the fourth letter, the entire name. People say we don't know his name. We have a lot of evidence. Of course, I've been writing a book for a long time about this. I've put out several videos going all the way back to, I think on YouTube, sometime in 2009 was when Hashem revealed. My first video about the name was revealed there, but it was revealed earlier than that on Google Videos many years ago. I've been teaching the name of YaHuWaH for 20 years now to the people of the world. So the name of YaHuWaH is being revealed. And there it says, Azi wa zimrat Yah. My strength and song is Yah. Wa yehi. And he has become. Li, which means mine. Le, which means unto Yeshua. Li, le, Yeshua. Mine unto salvation. And the word there, again, is Yod, Shin, Wa, Ayin, He. Yeshua, this powerful word that when combined with YaHuWaH's name, gives us the name of the branch, Yahushua. In Zechariah chapter 6, verse 11, we are told, behold the man whose name is the branch. And this is, of course, a prophetic revelation because he is called a man of symbol in the previous chapters. And it says that basically he will branch out and build the temple, the Hekal of YaHuWaH, and all of these things. And it's a messianic prophecy of the king Messiah, who is also a king priest. This is the revelation of the one who comes after the order of Melchizedek or Melchizedek. So this branch is described throughout the prophets. The prophets like Jeremiah or Yeremiyahu tell us, and also Yeshayahu as Isaiah tell us, that a man whose name is the branch is coming, and that this branch is the Messiah who comes forth from YaHuWaH. So Zechariah chapter 6 is telling us about a man whose name is Yahushua, Yod He Wa Shin Wa Ayin, and that this man who had the same name as Joshua, the son of Nun in the Torah, the scriptures, and in the book of Joshua, he is the one who led the children of Israel into the promised land and renewed the covenant, a picture of Yahushua, the Messiah. So therefore, this man whose name is the branch, this is a message that YaHuWaH is telling us, because he tells us that he does not do anything unless he first reveals it to his servants, the prophets. And he told them in advance the Messiah's name. And that is why when we read in the scriptures, we often see the Messiah's name is confused with a shorter form, Yeshuah, because the shorter form implies just salvation. However, the actual name, YaHuWaH Shin Wah Ayin, which appears at least 2 times in every single kosher Torah scroll, along with the shorter 5-letter spelling, the defective form, also appearing, this is Yahushua, the Messiah's name. This is why the man whose name is Hoshea is renamed by Moshe, the prophet, by Moses, in the book of Exodus chapter 17. Only 2 chapters after the Israelites safely crossed the sea and Moses breaks out into song, Azi wa Zimrat Yah, my strength and song is Yah, Wahi li le Yeshua, and he has become mine unto Yeshua, which literally means salvation. He has become mine unto salvation or deliverance. And of course, when you combine Yah and Yeshua, you get the full name Yahushua, just as when you combine the full name YaHuWaH with Yeshua, you get the full name Yahushua. This is very important because it is embedded throughout the scriptures. We are told this. This is the Torah. The Torah tells us that Moses could not lead the children of Israel into the promised land. No, only Yahushua, who he prophetically named, he led them in, and it was he who renewed the covenant. That is why Yahushua's good news, the Bashar, the glad tidings, are also called Brit Hadashah, because he revealed his Brit Hadashah, his renewed covenant, through Jeremiah in chapter 31, starting in verse 31. This is the covenant that I make with the house of Israel and the house of Yehudah in those days. And he goes on to say, I will place my Torah in their heart, and that everyone will know YaHuWaH. No one will ever have to teach his neighbor saying, know YaHuWaH, for they shall all know me, from the least of them to the greatest of them, declares YaHuWaH. And he finishes this prophecy with that he will remove their sins from them. And this is the part that most people emphasize. But all of the other elements have to also be in place for a covenant to hold. A covenant is dependent upon the words that are inscribed in the covenant. So therefore, we should read Isaiah and Jeremiah and the Hebrew scriptures and understand what that new covenant that Yahushua was coming to fulfill actually is. Now, if we go over to Yeshayahu, we can read more about this good news. In Yeshayahu, starting in chapter 52, and we're going to start in verse 10. Of course, you could start chapters, back, and it would reveal really what we want to show, because there's so much you could read here to really emphasize the beauty of the message. But if we read in verse 10, we start there. It says, Yahuwah shall lay bare his set-apart arm. Now the word arm there is zero, or zeroah. And this word literally means to sow, or it can mean a seed. But it is translated arm because the word implies an arm that is reaching out to sow the seed. However, the word arm does not actually appear there. So it is actually very interesting to note. And remember Yahushua's parable of the sower, for example. And he was the sower. And so this is again showing us that the right arm, the sower, the seed, is the King Messiah, Yahushua. And here it goes on to say in verse 10, it says, Yahuwah shall lay bare his set apart, his Kodesh arm in the eyes of all the nations, and all the ends of the earth shall see the deliverance of our Elohim, Yeshua Eloheinu. Here the word Yeshua again appears, Yod Shin Wah Ayin He, meaning the deliverance of our Elohim. So when the arm, the sower, the seed is revealed of Yahuwah's Kodesh arm, so to speak, when that is revealed, it says that we will see the Yeshua Eloheinu of our Elohim, the salvation, the deliverance of our Elohim. Turn aside, which also means to repent. Come out from there, touch not the unclean. Come out of her midst, be clean, you who bear the vessels of YaHuWaH. And this is, of course, is telling us to come out of Babylon. Do not touch the unclean thing. This is also echoed in the New Testament. By the words of Shaul, who's called Paul, he says the same thing. He reads this very verse. And he tells us that we should come out and not touch the unclean. So you don't touch the unclean thing. People today say that you can, eat pork. You can, touch all these abominations, do all these things, that the clean and the unclean is for the past. But YaHuWaH says a day is coming when you will again see the difference between the righteous and the wrong, the clean and the unclean. It says here, for you shall not come out in haste. Now remember, this is like Passover language. Coming out in haste, the children of Israel came out in haste. But here it says, listen to this. For you shall not come out in haste, nor go in flight, for YaHuWaH is going before you, just like he did the pillar of fire in the Exodus when he ransomed his people during the Passover, led them out. And when he went to go and fight against Pharaoh, before the Red Sea closed on his chariots, it says that YaHuWaH, who was in the fiery pillar, that he went to their rear guard, and so did the messenger of YaHuWaH, because they were leading the children of Israel. Then they went to the rear guard to fight against Pharaoh, to fight against his armies. And listen to what it says here. For YaHuWaH is going before you, and the Elohim of Yisrael is your rear guard. See, the messenger, the Malach YaHuWaH, who went behind the Israelites and fought, is the King Messiah, who's called the Aleph Taw, the word of YaHuWaH. That is why when the messenger of YaHuWaH, the Malach YaHuWaH, often appears, it says the word of YaHuWaH came unto the prophet saying, because the word of YaHuWaH is a person, a personality. It's very important to understand all of these matters, these secret matters that have been hidden throughout all these times. Listen to what it says after he says, the Elohim of Yisrael is your rear guard. It says, see, my servant shall work wisely. He shall be exalted and lifted up and very high. As many were astonished at you, so the disfigurement beyond any man's, and his form beyond the sons of men. He shall likewise startle many nations, and sovereigns shall shut their mouths at him. For what had not been recounted to them, they shall see, and what they had not heard, they shall understand. Who has believed our report, and to whom was the arm of YaHuWaH revealed? Now listen, Yeshuah is asking, who has believed this message? Who has believed this prophecy? And to whom is the arm of YaHuWaH, the sower, who is the seed, revealed to? Listen to what it says. For he, the arm of YaHuWaH, grew up before him as a tender plant. He was an offshoot, remember? And as a root out of dry ground. He has no form, nor splendor that we should look upon him, nor appearance that we should desire him. Despised and rejected by men, a man of pains and knowing sickness, as one whom the face is hidden, being despised, and we did not consider him. Truly he has borne our sicknesses and carried our pains. Yet we reckoned him stricken, smitten by Elohim, and afflicted. But he was pierced for our transgression. He was crushed for our crookedness, pierced for our transgressions, crushed because of our iniquities. Listen to what it says. He was crushed for our crookedness. The chastisement for our peace was upon him. And by his stripes we are healed. By his stripes we are healed. Many people don't even read these prophecies who carry the Hebrew scriptures today. They would hear this prophecy, and many of them would think this is coming from the Brit Hadashah, coming from the renewed covenant. But no. This is coming from Isaiah the prophet, Yeshayahu the prophet, before the Messiah ever came to the earth. And it says, listen further, he was oppressed and he was afflicted, but he did not open his mouth, just like Yahushua didn't open his mouth when they asked him all the questions before his death. It says, he was led as a lamb to the slaughter, a lamb. Remember Yahuchanan the Immerser, who is called John the Immerser, who said, behold the Lamb of YaHuWaH, who takes away the sin from the earth. This is the Lamb of YaHuWaH. It says here, He was led as a lamb to the slaughter, and as a sheep before its shearers is silent. But he did not open his mouth. He was taken from prison, just like Yahushua, who was locked in prison, right? Because it is Yahushua. He was taken from prison and from judgment. And as for his generation, who considered that he should be cut off from the land of the living, just as Daniel the prophet also says that Messiah, HaMashiach, would be cut off. And here it says that he would be cut off from the land of the living. For the transgression of my people, he was stricken, because his name is Yahushua, for he shall remove the sins of his people. Right? That is what the book of Matityahu says. And he was appointed a burial site with the wrong and with the rich at his death, because he had done no violence, nor was there deceit in his mouth. But YaHuWaH was pleased to crush him. He laid sickness on him. And when he made himself an offering for guilt, he would see a seed. He would prolong his days, and the pleasure of YaHuWaH would prosper in his hand. He would see the result of the suffering of his life and be satisfied. Through his knowledge, my righteous servant makes many righteous, and he bears their crookedness. Therefore I give him a portion among the great, and he divides the spoil with the strong, because he poured out his being unto death, and he was counted with the transgressors. And he bore the sin of many, and he made intercession for the transgressors. We know that Yahushua was nailed to the stake. It says in the book of John, or YaHuKanan chapter 19, it was the day of the preparation day of the Passover. As the lambs were being slaughtered, Yahushua was nailed to the stake. And we know that there was an inscription that was placed above his head on the stake. And there it said literally, Yahushua HaNazari Ul HaMelech HaYahudim, which would mean that Yahushua the Nazarene is the king of the Yahudim, who are called the Jews. And if you were to look at this as an acronym, you would see Yod He Wah He, the name of the Father on the Passover lamb. The Passover lambs would have the name of the family placed around their neck, so that people would know which lamb belonged to which family on that very busy day of the sacrifices that were taking place. And this sign above Yahushua's head is confirmation that he is the son of Yod He Wah He, YaHuWaH. And that is why, when you look at the very meaning of each letter of Yod He Wah He, you see that Yod is Yad, which means a hand. He is Ha, which means to behold. Wah means a nail, and He means to behold again. And that is the meaning of the letters before you look at the original pictographic forms, which literally show hand, behold, nail, behold. You see the hand, and beside him is the man, the image of a man. And beside that, the image of a nail, showing the suffering of Messiah. And again, you see the man. And if you were to say, hand behold, nail behold, to any person, and tell them to guess who we're talking about, everyone on earth just about now would at least have an idea. They may get his name wrong, but they would have a clue as to who you are referring to, because it is Yahushua who literally gives clarity to the name of YaHuWaH. He has inherited the name of YaHuWaH. He wears it as the priest, the high priest, the Kohen HaGadol, did in the Torah. It literally says on the crown of his head, as he serves as king priest before YaHuWaH Elohim, it literally says Kodesh, set apart unto YaHuWaH. And this is the name that he has inherited from his father. And that is why his name on the earth is Yahushua, meaning YaHuWaH gives salvation. YaHuWaH gives the deliverance and the redemption. And the scriptures tell us there is no other name. People tell us that we can call the Messiah whatever we want to, or that we don't have any evidence of his actual original Hebrew name. But it's very clear. The Strong's Concordance tells you Yehoshua. If you look up the word Jesus, simply, it'll tell you it's Yehoshua, which means YHWH saves. Now, simply, all we are doing is reconstructing the vowels and exchanging the Yeho to Yahu, Yahushua. That is the name. It's not very difficult to understand this in these end times. So much more could be said about that very fact. But the point is that the Messiah himself is the picture of the Lamb, the Passover Lamb. And that's why Yahuchanan, or John the Immerser, said, "Behold the Lamb of YaHuWaH." And in the book of Revelation, we see the Lamb who has 7 horns and 7 eyes. And it says that he was wounded. And it says that he is standing. That word is tamid, which means literally perpetually. It refers to the perpetual offerings of the lamb that the Passover literally initiated. The children of Israel were to then after construct the Beit HaMikdash, the house of the sanctuary, and before that the tent in which they would offer this perpetual slaughter offering of the lamb as a picture of that ransom of the firstborn, the Bikor, the first fruits. And Yahushua died literally during that time that the lambs were slain.
Yahushua the Messiah is not only a picture of the Passover lamb, he is also a picture of the leaven, having been laid in a tomb before the time of unleavened bread, a purging of the leaven. Not only this, he rose on the day of the first fruits as an ascending offering before YaHuWaH Elohim, just as the priest would lift up an offering of the barley harvest. Yahushua the Messiah lifted himself up before YaHuWaH as an ascension offering, a peace offering forever, so that we can partake in the resurrection. Brothers and sisters, I have been working very diligently for the last several years on a scholarly book that will examine the true pronunciation of the Father's name and the Messiah's name as well. This book is like no other. There are over 200 citations proving the pronunciation of the name and the pronunciation of various Hebrew words. Also, over 350 pictures. I have been telling you this for quite some time so that you will be prepared, because pre-sales will go live very soon, and I will make those announcements. Brothers and sisters, may YaHuWaH be with you during this season of the Passover, and may he lead you, guide you, and direct you in Yahushua's mighty name. Shalom.